Welcome, everyone. It's good to be back with you. I'm losing my voice, but I'm ready to go forward. I have missed you in the live program. As you know, we've been posting videos in the meantime. Dave, it's good to see you back. And Christy, it's good to see you also. As you respond back and forth, we'll get into the primary content. And today is rather special to me. It's a culmination from about 20 years of research, and it focuses on one of the most important questions we can ask, and that is, how do we achieve the holy grail in marketing? i.e., how do we build a predictive model of the customer's thinking process, a means to understand the decisions that they'll make, and how can we take that and build a testing program that achieves deeper and deeper insights? In particular, I'll call your attention to the slide that I have in front of me. You'll see three very important theories in our age. The first is theory of evolution, theory of relativity, and of course, Claude Shannon's information theory, which has much to do with what's unfolded in the internet. No doubt all three of these men were geniuses, but we don't associate them too often with something like this. But if you look closely, you're also seeing two different theories. Now, I am not suggesting that the theories on these pages are as significant as the theories on this first slide. However, I am suggesting that to certain people it's just as important, if not more important, because it impacts them in every area. Now, I have a lot to cover with you, and this is going to be deeper than some of the last two programs that we've done together. If you're new to marketing, stay with me, because I'll try to bring to you insights that are practical. If you don't have a testing program, you can still discover practical insights. One note, you're going to see me looking to the left. I have a giant monitor here, and we're still positioning things in the studio, and I have all of the chats coming in over here, and so you may see me looking back and forth. But bear with me, because I'm trying to make certain I can connect with you, understand how you're thinking. It's good to see Luke back, and I see Michael Peacock from Hawaii. Thanks for joining us, Michael. Now look at these two pages. You'll see a control and you'll see a treatment. Try to discern what the underlying theory is. And as you do so, just bear this in mind. Very few marketers field a page in the form of a signal set representing a hypothesis. I use the word theory in the most simple way when I discuss these pages as compared to the grander theories that you see, the unifying theories that we looked on the previous page. This is the elements of a customer theory. This page on the left, the control, represents a hypothesis that is part of a broader theory. The same can be said for the page on the right. Now, today, even as I'm trying to help you learn something, there are marketers debating over what to change on a page in order to improve performance. Unfortunately, most of them are talking about ideas. They're mentioning truisms. They're talking about something they learned at an event or a conference or in a previous test. But very seldom do they bring all of their ideas into the disciplined umbrella of a theory, excluding those which do not fit that particular theory and creating a variable cluster that will yield deep, rich insights about the customer. Now, as you bear with me, I'm going to drill down and explain in more depth. This program may take 2 episodes for us to get it down, but this is the journey we're going to go on. And you'll notice on this slide, we're going to begin with an experiment. And then we're going to talk about the nature of customer theory and the power of predictive customer theory. I saw my sound man jump. I hear a phone ringing. This is not a telethon. If you'd like to donate money, I'll give you the sound man's personal phone number. But I do hear the phone ringing in the background. Meclabs 7 Customer Theory Development Framework, which is really the crown jewel of all this. And we'll get to that as we start to break down the key pieces and close with another experiment. Let's begin with Test Protocol 9.5. This is a B2C company offering automobile maintenance services. In fact, it's a Fortune 500 company, one of the biggest in the industry. And their goal was to increase the number of appointments scheduled. They have a website. They want you to come to the website, and they want you to schedule or begin to set up an appointment so that you can visit one of their shops. That being said, here is a hypothesis, such as it is, This is the page that was their high performance page, and this page was a home page, and it's designed to get you into that appointment funnel, you might say. But I want you to pay more attention to the triangle, the triad on your right. We call this the discovery triad. It evolved from running 20,000 plus treatment tests here in our lab. We've built the largest library of case studies in the world, and this very specific field, by the way, but in this field of understanding the customer psychology as it unfolds in a process, we began running tests in the earliest days of the internet and developed the first programs, certification classes, and so on in conversion and optimization. But look over here. Your executive leader probably asked you a how question. Now, if you're a student and you've been with us a long time, you've seen the triad, but I'm going to take it in a new direction today. And the executive may say, how can we get more appointments scheduled? And as he asks that question, if you're not careful, you'll be tempted to start to come up with ways that you might want to try. That's a mistake. Instead, you need to pan back and spin the triad and ask a what question. Now, this is a phenomena question, but it's a particular phenomena question, and it's really focused on the data. And it says, what does the data teach us about behavior? That's the present tense behavior, the historic behavior. What is data telling us now about that behavior? I've taught you before that the value of marketing data is limited to its predictive power. If it doesn't help you make changes, if it doesn't help you improve, if it doesn't help you get higher conversion rates, its value is little to nothing. We're overwhelmed with data. In fact, often when I start a project, they all want to talk about data, data, data. It doesn't take a lot of data sometimes to uncover the primary obstacle to your success. In this case, we notice something very important. The goal of the page is to get people to schedule an appointment, but only 5% of the visitors coming to this page actually did so. And 16% were interacting with the coupons on the page. Now that is history. That is a fact, as close as we can to ascertaining so. But it doesn't get beneath it, into the wisdom portion. See, wisdom turns information. It takes information and forms patterns that allow you to see forward. In this case, we ask a why question. Why are customers behaving this way? So the what question and the why question, they all connect to form a cohesive picture of what might be taking place. Elad, I see that you're back. It's good to see you. We've missed you all. And we'll be back next week with another live edition of this. And the studio will be changing constantly as we continue to test. But we're glad to have you with us. Back to the case study. So we've started with a how question. We've asked, how can we get X? Then we moved to a what question. What does the data tell us about behavior? Then we move to a why question. Often this is where we use our heuristics to discern, why are people doing this? What is the underlying psychology? And as I've often taught, this page isn't real. It's a signal set generated by zeros and ones with the aim of producing something in your mind. Indeed, this signal set becomes the observations that precede your conclusions, that precede your decision. Now, stay with me because it gets interesting. So the coupon incentive created urgency. People wanted to respond. They wanted to interact with that. Many more people were responding. It looks like almost, 3 times as many as were with the appointment feature. But we began to think, what does this mean? What's going on here? And you'll notice in that second bullet point, I'll read it to you word for word. Asking a customer to schedule an appointment prior to seeing the coupon requires them to navigate back to the top of the page to do so. Now, if you're wondering, well, what does that mean? Just look ahead. So that led to a certain research question. Will sequencing the coupon before the schedule an appointment feature or its button generate a sense of urgency? Because the coupon has a limited, it has an expiration date. So here then becomes a hypothesis, and it's characterized by 4 key switches, and all great hypotheses in marketing are. There's an if statement. It's the summary of the hypothesis. There's a by statement. It's the tactical changes that you're making, and you can only add, change, or remove. There is a will statement. This is the behavioral change you're predicting, and it's typically specified with a metric. And then the most important of these 4 switches, the because factor. If customers' behavior change as a result of this test, we are trying to connect that change to something that we believe to be true about the customer. Now, with that crucial because switch, we're able to start building a composite of the customer's mind. Now, some of you say, well, I can barely test. Let's think about this in a couple of different ways. Number one, many of you right now who don't even have a testing program are making a mistake that we thought was happening in this hypothesis. You're sequencing your elements, the elements of your page, in the wrong order. You're asking people to move before they're ready. You're asking them to decide before they have sufficient information. And when that happens, the typical answer is no. So if you're here and you say, well, I want to learn to test, but I'm not testing yet, does this still apply to me? You bet it does. Let's unpack it, because we made a grave error in our thinking, and I'd like to share it with you. So here's what happens. There's the treatment. Now you see a coupon. It's presented first in the thought sequence, and right beneath it is the scheduled appointment call to action. Don't believe that the CTA has to be above the fold. That's nonsense. That goes all the way back to the days of print newspapers. We're not in that same space physically, and it doesn't apply in many situations. In fact, asking too soon is dangerous. It can be lethal to your conversion rate. So, Dave Fogel wants to know, I'm looking at the chat feature, if I'm wearing shorts. Dave, it's a secret today. I didn't even have time to go back in a suit. I was in a different building. And in fact, since you asked, I rushed from a hypothesis development meeting, which was 3.5 hours long, and I'll spend that long just formulating hypothesis. I was wearing my hat, and I didn't plan this. I just have it sitting in the seat behind me. I wear the hat everywhere I go, except when I get in the studio. And Dan Burstein, our editor, said, you should just wear it in the studio. People know you are who you are. It's true. It's old, and so am I. But I grew up in the bush, and it's natural for me, and I like it. Plus, it keeps my head from being sunburned. And so I took it off in order to look more formal and important for the rest of you. But Dave, I'm not wearing shorts, and I am now sans hat. But we'll see what happens next week. I'm back to the example. You'll see that the coupon is generated, you'll see the order is right, and you'll see the impact. Now, if we were right, this should improve conversion. But there's a catch. Let's look at the results. So here we have them. So there's the control, there's the treatment. That left control, you see a lot of gray boxes. That's because we're protecting the brand. But if you look, it's a configurator, and you can choose what is most important to you, and you use that feature, they use that feature to drive you into this funnel. However, we started with a coupon, and then we took them down to a way to print the coupon, and beneath that, schedule an oil change. What happened? Well, and remind you, I want to emphasize, for a company of this size, this change is enormous because their funnel is much larger than the average business. Its impact financially is remarkable. So we saw a 13.1% increase in the coupon interaction rate. It went up. But we also saw a 47.9% relative increase in appointment starts. That is powerful. And it tells you something important is taking place. But what exactly is it? Well, I'm going to take a deeper analysis of the data, because as we did so, we discovered something unexpected, something remarkable. And it leads to this whole understanding that we have to walk through today, this understanding about what a customer theory truly is and how it unlocks the potential revenue that you are still leaving on the table. Ultimately, our original thinking was the increase in coupon download. See that 13 cent, and the increase in 13%, and the increase in appointment schedule, 48%. That was exactly what we saw in the data. But we hadn't seen the third bullet point, which is very little overlap. What does that mean? The connection between the coupons and the appointments wasn't there. Most of the people who interacted with the coupon weren't the people who scheduled an appointment. So our theory about getting that sequence just right was wrong. Now, this is a problem every one of you may be having right now. I spoke just yesterday in a series of exchanges with a very large lead generation organization who is not interpreting their test data correctly. So often we set these tests up, we put some ideas together, and then we track the difference and we think we've gained the maximum. If we get a conversion lift, we're happy. What we don't know is how much conversion lift we could have received that we left on the table. And we don't know it because we're not structuring our tests with a hypothesis that is designed to produce deeper and deeper insights about the customer. This was not for us the win that we wanted to see. Yes, the brand was excited, but we knew we were leaving more money on the table. Because essentially our assumption, that warrant about the customer, was wrong. The because statement in the hypothesis was incorrect. So what did that mean for us? What are we to conclude from that? Well, let's look at this again in light of the hypothesis. There's the if statement, the by statement, the will statement, and the because statement. And you see the control, the treatment, and the results. In most organizations, this would be a win, but it's not, because the most important item on that page is the because statement. It's not the conversion increase. The truth is, if you knew your customers well enough, you'd maximize conversion. If you knew your customers well enough, your business would be transformed. If you knew your customers better than your competitors, you would have true, sustainable, competitive advantage. So, if you're tracking with me, stay, because I'm getting to the good stuff. We're going to learn some things today I've never taught other than in a graduate program in a university setting. But they're practical and they apply to our everyday activities, and they can take us to a new level in our results. So then we had to go back and ask some questions. What was wrong with this hypothesis? Why did we see a lift, but we didn't see the connection that we expected in the attributes or in the sort of insights we were hoping to regarding the customer's mindset? The because statement is always about the customer's mindset. Things they're afraid of, things they're attracted to, etc. So, let's dig deeper. What we could conclude is that asking a customer to schedule an appointment was too intense. Now wait a second, we're moving towards a new hypothesis. And when I say conclude, this is just preliminary thinking that might inform the next test. You know, we began this whole mission to understand why people say yes before there was a single testing company in existence. I'm talking about digital. We built the sort of conversion tool set and patented it before there were conversion boutiques and conversion services. And we are a research institute, for those of you that are new to us. But one of the things that we saw early on with the testing programs is even when they give you back the data, people aren't sure how to interpret it. It's really quite confusing. In this case, here's what we were starting to wonder. If we applied the conversion heuristic that you hear me teach so often, C equals 4m plus 3v plus 2i minus f minus 2a, if you apply that, there may be some anxiety when you're asking people to schedule an appointment, but they don't know what it's going to cost. Doesn't that make sense to you? And that insight, by the way, that intuitive insight is where the mystery of creativity and art complements the discipline of science. And in this case, we started to wonder, was it for a different reason we saw this result? Was it because we showed a price that people anchored their expectation in a price point that was going to be reasonable? So, without that price point, were we triggering anxiety? There's something called implied anxiety. Now, if you've had certification in our training, this is not in the certification course. Implied anxiety is different than that raw anxiety that you create when you do the wrong thing in a website. This is implied by something that's missing. But the question is, are we right? Is that really what's going on? So the new theory we're going to understand as we sort of teach today, but it was based on this notion that maybe putting the coupon at the top of the page gave people a sense of comfort that they had some expectation for the zone or the range that the price would fall in. Is that making sense to you? Are you following that? I see Andrew Layton says, yes, wear the hat. Andrew, how long have you been attending these events? How many do you think you've attended? If you get a moment, tell me in the chat feature. And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you guys a question here in just a second. But here's a thought, that the prospects are more likely to schedule an appointment when they know the approximate cost of the service. So Andrew says he's been on this for 8 to 10 of these programs. So I'm going to follow his counsel. I'm going to put on my hat. I know one thing, I like it a lot better than the other way around. So Andrew, you got it, and I'm going to keep going. And I'm not trying to be, I don't know, clever or viral or any of that. I just want to relax with my audience, be authentic, and help you learn. And some of you, by the way, you hear this on various programs. It's true, I'd like you to subscribe if you haven't. I'd like you to hit like and share. On the other hand, I don't care how big my community gets as long as I have the right people in it. I don't care about scale, I care about quality. I want authentic relationships. I recognize Andrew because I look at every single person's name that interacts and think about them, and we go through the chat logs. I see Dave and all those names I've called out already, people that I recognize from previous events. Some people are on here quiet, they lurk. Jump into the conversation, give us your thinking. We value that. Many others watch it once we post it because they're overseas. But for now, just know that I'm glad you're here. And let's go back to the experiments again. So here we go, a coupon change. The coupon runs in the month immediately following the test. It switched to a % off message. This was a new coupon. With a corresponding decrease in coupon downloads and appointment starts was realized. That was an indicator to us. We thought about that. What does that mean? And how can we further understand our customer given these findings? With that in mind, here's what I'd like to do. I want to take you through 3 shifts in thinking. With these 3 shifts, we're going to find ourselves walking through 7 steps for building a customer theory. We have honed these steps having run thousands of tests. And if you learn them, you can apply them and literally, and I don't think this is exaggeration, at least double the value of your testing program. If you're not testing, you still want to use all of these insights to build a customer theory. If you're in sales, talking directly to customers can help you build the customer theory. So stay with me and let's talk about the first important thought shift, the first important movement. We need to understand the nature of a customer theory. Now you can go to marketing school and never hear these words. Go to Wharton or some of the others, at least when I last looked at curriculums. The reality is these words were developed in our lab after many, many years of work, and we finally realized that the goal of testing wasn't to get a lift, but it was to learn something so profound about the customer that you could predict their behavior. Once you build that model, you're ahead. And so if I'm going to talk about customer theory, I need to define it in an interesting way. And we talked about these other theories. So let's think for a moment about some of the characteristics of a theory. It's concise and coherent, and it's systematic. It's formed from hypotheses that have been consistently confirmed through experimentation, and typically these must be repeatable. It's broadly applicable, it's independent, it's used to describe, explain, and predict, 3 key words. And it should be something you can falsify, or you can improve. You should read Karl Popper on this if you're interested in a philosopher of science who has some interesting things to say. Now, we know this is true in many disciplines outside of marketing, but now let's think about it in terms of marketing. So I'm going to point to a classic landing page and 2 buttons, and we're going to unpack something deep and important. So stay with me, please. Button A is red, button B is dark gray. I don't think I'm saying anything you haven't already learned. And the page has a light gray background. Dave, let me know if I'm confusing you. We'll go back and slow it down for you. In the meantime, this helps us think about what kinds of statements we can make that will become the building blocks of our theory. So we can do something called an associational statement. It's about association. It's about connection of events. For instance, why are those buttons red and gray? Because they represent the company's colors. And that's one way to think. Stay with me because, again, there's 4 of these and they connect in the bigger way as we get to marketing. The second is we can make statements that have to do with an explanation of past events. So these are telling us what happened. Look at the 3 observations. Customers clicked the red button because, there's that all-important word, it was sequenced first. That's one theory, could be true. It's a statement, it's a proposition that we may want to validate. Customers clicked the red button because it visually contrasted with the rest of the page. That's a different reason. And it can become the kernel of a hypothesis. And thirdly, customers clicked the red button because of its process level value prop. It promised something in exchange for the click. This has to do with the text of the button. All 3 of those are explaining what happened historically, but they do this so that we can make a probabilistic statement, and that is we can predict what will happen in the future. So then, here's a casual statement. Customers clicked the red button because it visually contrasted with the rest of the page. And now we make a probabilistic statement. Customers will be more likely to click on buttons that contrast highly with their backgrounds than on buttons that blend into their background. True or not, we don't know. That's why we've ran 20,000 experiments. We learn from testing. Now, if you think about the 4 of these together, there's existence statements, there's associational statements, casual statements, and probabilistic statements. By the way, I worked all night because of the intensity of what we have going on here, and much of it was thinking about customer theory. And so if I'm stumbling around a bit, it's because I'm tired. But I didn't want to miss the day, and I enjoy spending time with you like this. And I will keep drinking tea and keep forging ahead. See the existence statement? It's a description. The casual statement, it's an explanation. The associational statement, it's a connection. The probabilistic statement, it's a prediction. Can you see how these pieces can come together? So the problem is those statements can be part of a theory, but a theory is not infallible. Some of the theories you hold closest are probably wrong. In fact, in today's, I think, day and age, we're far too certain of things that we should realize we can't be 100% certain of at all. That's a whole different thing we'll talk about when I start the new series on marketing and meaning, because everything I'm talking right now, everything I'm talking about connects to your own life. We are trapped by the warrants and the theories, i.e. the self-deception that guides our own behavior. It's like a web of deceit that we have to untangle if we're ever going to do what Carl Jung spoke about when he talks about individuation. It's hard to know who you are because who you are has been so influenced, so unfairly influenced and manipulated by all sorts of theories. And these theories can do more harm than good when we take them to be absolutely true. But let's move on. So we have to test. Here's 3 theories you've probably never heard of, but they're all interesting. Geocentrism, that's a fancy name. You can look at the etymology of the word or just break it down. But this was the idea that the earth is at the center of the universe. Then there's phrenology. This was one of my favorites. These guys would feel your head and tell you all sorts of things about your personality based on the bumps on your head. And they were considered scientists, very important thinkers. And then there's miasma theory. I guess I'm pronouncing it right. To be candid, I haven't heard of it before. The other 2 I know. This one was just developed for our research here. But I do understand the theory that bad vapors were causing the plague. And I've studied in history this whole theory around vapors, but not under that name. Of course, germ theory made that theory obsolete. And astronomy, I think, has made the other theory obsolete, though there are some dissenters who believe we've never been to the moon. Joe Rogan was talking about that. And we could go on. All I want you to know, by the way, well, let me just keep going. I say this for Andrew. Andrew, I would, if I were to take off this hat and you were to feel the bumps in my head, you'd realize what's wrong with my personality. But let's keep going. All right, so they're making fun of me over on the left. Benaiah is answering chat for us. The executive producer is Cliff Rayner, and he's been with me for over 40 years. We've been friends. Over 40 years. We met in high school in a fight. And we've been thick as thieves ever since. Let me keep going. So now let's take that concept of a theory and apply it to marketing, because essentially there's a gap. And theory, this gap is between what you know and what you need to know. And we can span that gap. We can build a bridge across it with this methodology. And that allows us to get inside the customer's mind. When there's a one-to-one relationship, sometimes you can ask. But when you're dealing with what we call S1, the largest stochastic sample size of your audience, that's the majority of people coming into your site, there's no way to know unless you're studying behavior. So here's what customer theory does. It describes, explains, and predicts customer behavior based on repeatedly confirmed patterns of action that have been observed and associated with ontological, that's a 50-cent word for philosophy of being, with ontological attributes. Now, what is the bottom line? We look at certain behaviors and they enable us to draw some tentative conclusions, i.e. hypotheses that we can leverage in our relationship with the customer. So, we need to understand, and this is the second point. So the first was, we need to understand the nature of customer theory. What is it? You can't aim for it if you don't understand it. But if you are understanding it, then we need to understand basically that our testing program, the apex of that program, is customer theory. So, a strategic testing program, and this is a key principle, begins with a tentative customer theory. It's just tentative. Every entrepreneur starts with this. The essence of entrepreneurship is marketing. The essence of marketing is the message. The essence of the message is the value proposition. And an entrepreneur begins with a theory. He may have a strange theory, as Peter Thiel talks about, something you believe to be true that most of the world denies. But in the end, it culminates in a much more accurate customer theory. The difference between the former and the latter is in its predictive power. All right, here's an example. Yes, Dave Fogel says it's like the Matrix. Red pill, red button, blue button. All right, now take a look here. 161%, 102%. All of this is aggregating. This was for a major institution, the fastest growing digital bank in the world. And as we worked with them through a mortgage application process, we saw a 934% cumulative increase. And by the way, the test bed produced $117 million in additional revenue. This was only possible not because we tried some ideas, but because we built a cohesive theory that helped us understand why customers were behaving in a certain way and how they would behave in the future. With this in mind, I'll show you something that if you were a scientist working in our lab or working in our program, you would understand how the discovery triad leads to a hypothesis framework that informs a testing program that is confirming or rejecting, confirming or denying various predictions, the will statement of the hypothesis. And that will statement connects to the ontology of the customer, the because statement, because the customer is, because the customer wants, because the customer fears, those types of statements. Now, I'm going to break that down. I'm going to show you in psychographics and demographics before we're all done how it all connects. But for now, you need to understand the importance of systematically testing into a theory. I'm looking at this big infographic on my left, but the point of it all is unless what you're doing is producing predictive power, it's a waste of your energy. So, here's what we do. We describe what behavior is occurring, we explain why it's occurring, and we predict under what conditions can we expect to see the behavior occur in the future, or the opposite. Now, the criteria then, now this is sort of important. And mind you, I'm exerting from a 12-week graduate program that we've designed, and you might think, wait, this is way above me. No, it's not. You already have a customer theory. You already believe certain things about your customer. The question are those hypotheses true? Let's suppose you have 5 or 6 major beliefs. Which ones of those 5 are accurate, and how can you get them to be more accurate? Because if you can transform your business. You can dominate your industry. Steve Jobs believed things that no one else did. I remember I remember when he released the tablet, and nobody thought we would buy it. But we all lined up buying it because Steve knew us in some ways better than we knew ourselves. Testing is the way you take the risk out of that type of activity. So, know the attribute of the is. That's the existence statement, a description of events, what is. Understand the nature of the does. That's the associational statements, the connection of events. Trace, here's what you do. You trace the does back to the is. And if you're thinking, well, wait a second, what are we talking about here? Well, if I'm on the beach, I'm here in Florida, I'm not far from the beach right now, and I see a set of tracks, and I know there are only, down that way on the beach, there are only 3 businesses. 2 of them are bars, and one of them is a bait shop. When I look at your track in the sand, there's a lot I can tell. To be sure, there's a lot I don't know. But one, I can tell the direction you're going, and because of that, I can discern that if you're going to select any one of those 3 options, it's going to be one of those 3 options. You're either going to a bar or you're going to get bait. If I keep expanding on that, I can build a tight set of possibilities that I can test my way into. But I can tell a lot about who you are by just looking at the track. Its weight, its distance. I was raised in the bush, big part of my life was in the Yukon Territory or British Columbia, northern British Columbia, sort of parallel to Alaska. And tracks, understanding sign was critical to survival. You can also trace those tracks backward and learn about the person. For instance, if you're actually going to be let in one of those bars, you're probably over 18 or 21, and I can probably tell that by the size of your track, and I can tell it by the direction you're going. This is tracing the does back to the is. Remember, data is just behavioral traces. It's brain tracks. So connect the is does pattern, and you can predict the future. You can predict he's either going to go there, there, or there. A little bit further down the path, you can see the direction he's headed, and you can realize, he's going to option B, that bar. Because before he ever gets there, I can see that he's eliminated the other options because his yes in that direction is a no in every other. And therein lies the power. So where does all this come together? Well, let's go back to this original hypothesis. Look at the because statement. Customers are anxious about missing the opportunity to redeem their coupon. That's what we thought. But we weren't right. So what do we do with that? Well, we apply the triad. We say again what happened in this behavior. We learned those numbers. For instance, we learned that the people interacting with the coupon were different than the people interacting with the appointment setting configurator. And then we asked, well, why are they behaving that way? And we had this idea about price anchoring. And this produces a new hypothesis. We let customers know, here's sort of the whole statement, if we let customers know they will see the price soon, or it's about to be shown, adding a value copy about a free estimate, we might increase the appointment start rate because customers are anxious about the total price of the service. Seems reasonable, but is it? Well, that's where we're going to unpack the 7 steps. And candidly, I can take you ahead. I'm going to skip through them all right now at high speed to show you how that particular piece turns out, because here's what we discovered. There's the test. We'll get into this in more depth soon. But something happened between the control and the treatment quite different than what happened the first time. Would you like to know what that is? Well, we're going to share that with you in the next session. But in that session, I'm going to break each of these 7 steps out so that you can understand how to get inside the mind, how to categorize your insights, and how to build a customer theory with every single interaction that you observe on your site. And that will produce for you a game that's sometimes very hard to describe. It's remarkable what it can do in terms of not just marketing, but product development and every other area of your business. So, there we have it. And I have been less interactive today, so let me ask you this real quickly before we go. I see Dave again and Andrew and Advantage Learning Academy. I don't know your first name, but tell it to me if you have a chance. Elad and Dave and anyone else on here right now, what's the most important thing we've said today? I want to see what you think very quickly, and then I'm going to ask you another question. What's the most important thing you've heard today as it relates to your own business and the things you're trying to accomplish? Besides the fact that I have a hat. Go ahead. As that's coming in, I wonder if you could take the same theory and apply it to what's getting ready to happen in the election. Because you can. And in fact, the upset that occurred 4 years ago was there in the data if someone paid attention, but they didn't. They were blinded by assumptions. So, yes, path says no to all other ways. Michael, you're absolutely right. One yes equals 10,000 no's. Luke Flint says that choosing a destination means not choosing any of the other destinations. That's correct, or at least prioritizing them. Sean says the most important thing is putting yourself in your customer's mind. It's good to see you back, Sean. And Jennifer asked a question, but I don't see it, Jennifer. Let me see. Can this be done for extremely small businesses, solopreneurs, and no budget? Yes, Jennifer, it can. I'm glad you asked that question. I'll close with this. First of all, if you're just starting a business, your customer set is very small. By knowing what to look for and by carefully watching the interactions on your site, you can start to observe this on your own. In fact, I would recommend for every solopreneur, if you have a website, that you use a chat feature and that you use the chat not simply to close deals, but to understand where people are stuck, what questions are on their mind. When we're doing optimization, we often analyze those chat logs so we can see patterns that will help us test. It's very inexpensive to add chat now. And if you do that, Jennifer, you'll be able to interact more frequently with visitors on your site that you might never meet in person. If you add to that conversations with your existing customers, and you add to that the dialogue you've had with prospective customers, all with a view to sort of filling out this pattern that we're going to discuss next week, you can get to the answers. It's easier in some ways to get to the answers with a small business than it is with a large one. So everyone, thank you. Thank you for putting up with me. And you know, I appreciate the community side of what we're doing. Let's build a community of just the right people, and let's learn together and grow and help each other grow. Thanks again.